I never thought that finding a yellow sticky note on my laptop screen would be the moment that changed everything. The words were written in Tyler's familiar scrawl. Moving in with Sarah tomorrow. We need space to figure this out. Back in a week to talk. No explanation, no discussion, just a casual announcement that he was abandoning our 8-year marriage for his interior designer colleague, like he was informing me about a business trip. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What Tyler didn't anticipate was returning 7 days later to discover that I had figured things out too, including exactly where every penny of our shared assets had gone, and more importantly, where they were going next. The note was stuck to my MacBook when I returned from my morning run around Lady Bird Lake, still wearing my sweat-soaked Austin Marathon training shirt and trying to process what I was reading. Tyler's coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, still warm, which meant he had waited until I left to make his grand exit. 8 years of marriage, 3 years of building Rodriguez Marketing Solutions into Austin's fastest-growing boutique consulting firm, and 2 years of saving for the house renovation that would transform our Westlake Hills property into our dream home, all reduced to a sticky note placed with the casual indifference of a grocery list reminder. I stood in our granite-countered kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Barton Creek, holding that yellow square of paper like it contained instructions for defusing a bomb. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler, who managed multi-million-dollar real estate developments and prided himself on detailed contracts and comprehensive planning, had chosen the most informal possible method to blow up our life together. No lawyers, no mediation, no conversation about counseling or working through whatever issues had apparently become insurmountable while I was focused on building my business and training for marathons. The house felt different immediately, not just because Tyler was gone, but because his absence revealed things I hadn't noticed before. The way our home had gradually transformed to accommodate his preferences while mine seemed to disappear. The contemporary art pieces I loved had been replaced with Sarah Chen's minimalist selections during their collaborative design consultations over the past 6 months. My grandmother's vintage leather armchair, the one piece of furniture I had insisted on keeping when we moved into this house, had been relocated to the guest bedroom because it didn't fit the aesthetic vision Tyler and Sarah were implementing. Sarah Chen. I had met her exactly 9 times at various industry events and dinner parties, always introduced as Tyler's talented design partner who was helping optimize the staging for his luxury properties. She was striking in that effortless way that made other women simultaneously admire and resent her, with perfectly asymmetrical black hair and a wardrobe that somehow made minimalism look expensive rather than boring. Sarah had a gift for making herself essential to every project she touched, gradually expanding her role from simple staging consultation to comprehensive design management. What I hadn't realized until this moment was that her optimization strategy apparently extended beyond Tyler's properties to Tyler himself. The most disturbing part wasn't the betrayal itself, though that cut deep enough. It was the calculated nature of how this had unfolded. Tyler hadn't left impulsively or made a mistake in a moment of weakness. This was a planned transition, executed, with the same methodical approach he brought to his development projects. The timing was particularly strategic, coming just 3 weeks after I had signed the contracts for the largest client acquisition in Rodriguez Marketing Solutions history, a comprehensive campaign management deal with a consortium of Austin tech startups that would triple our annual revenue. I walked through our house with new eyes, noticing details that suddenly took on different meanings. The expensive bottle of wine in our refrigerator that Tyler claimed was for celebrating my new contracts, still unopened and now clearly intended for a celebration I wasn't invited to join. The absence of his toiletries from our master bathroom, not recently removed, but gradually diminished over weeks, in a way that suggested advanced planning rather than sudden departure. The empty spaces in his closet where his favorite clothes used to hang, gaps I had somehow failed to register as they developed. Most telling was the condition of his home office. Tyler was notorious for his organized chaos, with project files scattered across every surface and sticky notes covering his monitor with reminders and deadlines. Today, the office was immaculate. Every surface cleared, every file properly stored, every piece of paper either filed or discarded. This wasn't the workspace of someone who had made a spontaneous decision to leave. This was the office of someone who had been systematically preparing for departure while maintaining the pretense of normal domestic routine. My phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment I hoped it might be Tyler, with some explanation or clarification that would make this situation less devastating. Instead, it was Rachel Thompson, my best friend since college and currently the most successful financial advisor in Austin, asking if I wanted to grab coffee later. Rachel had been encouraging me for months to take a more active role in managing our household finances, pointing out that my business success hadn't translated into personal financial oversight. Tyler had always handled our joint accounts, investments, and major financial decisions, insisting that his real estate background made him better equipped to optimize our wealth management strategy. I had accepted this arrangement without much consideration, partly because I trusted Tyler's expertise, and partly because managing Rodriguez Marketing Solutions left me with limited bandwidth for additional financial complexity. Tyler presented our financial situation through quarterly summaries that showed steady growth and strategic positioning, similar to the investor reports his development company provided to stakeholders. These reports always indicated that we were building substantial equity through real estate investments and diversified portfolios, positioning us for long-term financial security and eventual early retirement. Now, staring at that yellow sticky note, I realized I had never independently verified any of Tyler's financial management. I had access to our joint checking account for daily expenses, but the investment accounts, savings strategies, and real estate holdings were entirely under Tyler's control. I knew we had money because our lifestyle suggested prosperity, but I had no idea about the specific amounts, locations, or structures of our assets. For a woman who could track every penny of business expenses and analyze client budgets with forensic precision, my ignorance about my own household finances was suddenly alarming. The devastating possibility began forming in my mind that Tyler's departure might involve more than just romantic betrayal. If he had been planning this transition for months, what other aspects of our shared life had he been systematically preparing to dissolve? Had the financial reports been as carefully curated as his office departure? Were the assets I assumed we were building together actually positioned for his individual benefit? I spent the next hour searching through our home office for financial documents, bank statements, investment records, anything that would give me independent insight into our actual situation. What I found was remarkably little. Tyler maintained digital records for everything, with physical documents limited to property deeds and insurance policies. The property deeds revealed something that made my stomach drop. Our Westlake Hills house, which I had assumed was jointly owned, was titled solely in Tyler's name. The documentation showed that while I had contributed equally to the down payment, Tyler had structured the purchase to reflect only his income and creditworthiness. When I had questioned this arrangement during the buying process 3 years ago, Tyler had explained it as a strategic decision for tax optimization and future investment flexibility. He assured me that joint ownership would be established once we completed the renovation project, positioned as a partnership between his development expertise and my marketing capabilities. The renovation that was now being designed and managed by Sarah Chen, whose aesthetic vision had gradually replaced my preferences in every room. The implications were staggering. If Tyler had systematically positioned our major assets for his individual control while maintaining the appearance of partnership, my financial security might be far more precarious than I had realized. The success of Rodriguez Marketing Solutions provided me with independent income, but the lifestyle we had built together depended on shared resources and coordinated financial planning. If those shared resources were actually Tyler's individual assets, I could be facing not just the end of my marriage, but potential financial devastation. My laptop chimed with an email notification, and I glanced at the screen to see a message from Austin Community Bank with the subject line, Account Activity Alert. The automated message informed me that a significant transfer had been processed from our joint savings account, reducing the balance to below the minimum threshold for our premium banking package. The transfer amount was substantial enough to trigger the alert, representing nearly 6 months of my business income and far more than any regular expense we had ever discussed. I immediately logged into our online banking system, using the credentials Tyler had shared with me for monitoring our household budget. The account activity revealed a pattern of transfers over the past 2 weeks that I had completely missed while focused on client deadlines and marathon training. Substantial amounts had been moved from our joint savings to accounts I didn't recognize, with memo fields indicating investment optimization and portfolio rebalancing. The timing of these transfers, all occurring during business hours when I was typically in client meetings, suggested careful planning to avoid my immediate attention. The online banking portal showed that I had viewing access to our joint checking and savings accounts, but the investment accounts Tyler managed were not visible in my dashboard. When I attempted to access them using what I thought were shared credentials, the system informed me that I was not authorized to view those accounts. This meant that Tyler had established our investment structure to provide me with visibility only into the accounts necessary for daily household management, while maintaining exclusive control over our substantial assets. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Tyler hadn't just left our marriage, he had been systematically extracting our shared wealth while preparing his exit strategy. The woman who had built a successful consulting business through careful analysis and strategic planning had been completely outmaneuvered in her own household by someone she trusted absolutely. The yellow sticky note wasn't just announcing Tyler's departure. It was informing me that I had been comprehensively betrayed on multiple levels simultaneously. I called Rachel immediately, no longer caring about maintaining the pretense that everything was fine in my marriage. She answered on the second ring with her characteristic directness. "Emma, you sound terrible. What's happening?" "Tyler left," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "But I think that might be the least of my problems." "Left for where? A business trip?" Left, as in moved in with Sarah Chen and informed me via sticky note. "But Rachel, I think I've been financially manipulated for years and I'm just now realizing it." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about Rachel's assessment of my situation. As a financial advisor, she had undoubtedly seen similar scenarios play out with devastating consequences for the unprepared spouse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm coming over right now," she said finally. "Don't do anything, don't sign anything, and don't talk to Tyler until I get there. We need to understand exactly what you're dealing with before you take any action." "Rachel, I think I might be in serious trouble." "Maybe," she replied with the honesty that made her both an excellent advisor and a trusted friend. "But you're also one of the smartest and most resourceful people I know. If Tyler thinks he can outmaneuver Emma Rodriguez, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he is." After ending the call, I sat in my kitchen holding that yellow sticky note, looking around at the house that might not actually be my house, thinking about the assets that might not actually be our assets, and feeling a familiar sensation I hadn't experienced since the early days of building my business. The combination of fear and determination that comes with recognizing that everything you thought was secure is actually at risk, but that you have more power to influence the outcome than you initially realized. Tyler had made a critical error in his departure strategy. He had assumed that 8 years of financial dependency and domestic accommodation had left me unprepared to independently manage a complex situation. He had underestimated the same analytical skills and strategic thinking that had built Rodriguez Marketing Solutions into a thriving business. Most importantly, He had failed to consider that the woman who had successfully navigated Austin's competitive consulting market might be far more resourceful than the compliant wife he had been conditioning me to become. The yellow sticky note that was supposed to inform me of my abandonment had instead become the catalyst for discovering the full scope of Tyler's betrayal. But it had also revealed something Tyler hadn't anticipated, that his carefully planned departure had left behind evidence of financial manipulation that could fundamentally alter the power dynamics of our separation. For the first time since finding that note, I felt something other than shock and devastation. I felt the sharp focus that always emerged when I was faced with a challenge that required every skill I had developed. Tyler Mitchell was about to learn that leaving Emma Rodriguez was much easier than escaping the consequences of betraying her. Rachel arrived at my house within 30 minutes, carrying her professional laptop bag and wearing the focused expression that made her one of Austin's most sought-after financial advisors. She had changed from whatever casual Saturday outfit she'd been wearing into business attire, signaling that she was treating this as a full professional consultation, rather than a friendly support visit. The transformation reminded me why Rachel commanded premium fees from clients who needed someone capable of untangling complex financial situations under pressure. "Show me everything," she said without preamble, settling at my kitchen island and opening her laptop. "Bank statements, investment documents, property records, tax returns, everything you can find. We need to understand the complete picture before Tyler realizes you're investigating." I spread the limited physical documents across the granite surface while Rachel logged into her professional database systems. Watching her work, I was struck by how methodical and comprehensive her approach was compared to my panicked searching earlier. Rachel's success came from her ability to see financial patterns that others missed, to identify vulnerabilities and opportunities that weren't immediately obvious. If anyone could help me understand what Tyler had actually done, it was someone who specialized in protecting people from exactly this kind of sophisticated manipulation. "Emma, this property deed structure is concerning," Rachel said after reviewing the documentation for our house. "Tyler positioned this purchase to exclude you from ownership while using your income to qualify for a larger loan amount. See these calculations? Your salary was included in the debt-to-income ratio that enabled the mortgage approval, but the legal title reflects only Tyler's ownership. That's not tax optimization. That's asset isolation." The technical explanation confirmed what I had feared, but hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Tyler hadn't made a strategic decision for our mutual benefit. He had used my financial contribution and creditworthiness to acquire a property that I had no legal claim to, while allowing me to believe we were building shared equity. The house I considered our home, where I had invested my time, money, and emotional energy for 3 years, was entirely Tyler's asset. "What about the investment accounts?" I asked, pulling up the online banking portal on my laptop. "I can see our joint checking and savings, but Tyler always handled the investment management. I assumed it was standard for one spouse to coordinate those accounts to avoid confusion." Rachel's expression grew more serious as she reviewed the account access. "Emma, this isn't standard coordination. This is financial compartmentalization. In healthy partnerships, both spouses have visibility into investment accounts, even if one person manages the daily transactions. The fact that you can't even view the account balances suggests deliberate exclusion rather than role division." She continued typing, cross-referencing information against databases I didn't recognize. "I'm running Tyler's name through public property records and business filings. If he's been systematically isolating assets, there might be patterns in other holdings that reveal the scope of his strategy." While Rachel worked, I attempted to piece together the timeline of Tyler's behavior changes. The past year had been consumed with growing Rodriguez marketing solutions and preparing for the major client contracts I had recently secured. During that period, Tyler had been increasingly involved with Sarah Chen's design projects, spending long hours on what he described as strategic collaborations that would position Mitchell Development Group for expansion into luxury residential markets. I had been supportive of his professional growth, just as he claimed to be supportive of mine. Now I realized that Tyler's expanded collaboration with Sarah had coincided with increased secrecy about our household finances. The quarterly reports, that used to include detailed breakdowns of our investment performance, had become higher-level summaries focused on overall growth percentages rather than specific account details. When I occasionally asked questions about particular investments or strategies, Tyler would provide general explanations about market conditions and portfolio diversification, but rarely specific information about individual holdings or account structures. "Emma, I found something," Rachel said, her voice carrying a tone I recognized from her most serious client consultations. "Tyler has been establishing business entities over the past 18 months. 3 limited liability companies, registered in Texas, 2 registered in Delaware, all formed during the period when you were focused on your client expansion." She turned her laptop screen toward me, showing a database of corporate filings. Mitchell Development Holdings, Mitchell Investment Management, and Mitchell Property Solutions, all formed within the past year and a half. The Delaware entities are MJM Capital and Strategic Asset Holdings. The timing suggests these weren't established for legitimate business expansion, but for asset protection and transfer purposes. The implications were staggering. While I had been building my consulting business and trusting Tyler to manage our shared financial growth, he had been creating a parallel financial infrastructure that excluded me entirely. The business entities would allow him to transfer assets out of our joint accounts into corporate holdings that I had no visibility into or claim against. The Delaware registrations provided additional privacy protection that would make it difficult for me to track or recover transferred funds. "Can we trace where our money went?" I asked, feeling sick as the scope of Tyler's preparation became clear. "That's going to require forensic accounting," Rachel replied. "But the transfer patterns in your joint savings account show regular movements to accounts associated with these business entities. Tyler has been systematically relocating your shared assets into corporate structures he controls exclusively." My phone buzzed with a text message from Tyler. The timing felt ominous, as if he somehow knew I was investigating his financial manipulations. The message was brief and characteristically casual. "Hope you're okay. Know this is hard. Will. Call tomorrow to discuss logistics." Rachel read the message over my shoulder and shook her head. "He's establishing a communication pattern that suggests concern for your well-being while maintaining control of the timeline. Don't respond yet. We need to understand your legal position before you engage in any discussions about logistics." What kind of logistics could he possibly mean? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Property division, asset separation, support arrangements. Basically, he's preparing to negotiate from a position where he controls most of the assets. And you're dependent on his voluntary cooperation. The longer you wait to respond, the more leverage he thinks he has. The strategic nature of Tyler's approach was becoming clearer with each piece of evidence Rachel uncovered. This wasn't a man who had fallen in love with someone else and impulsively left his marriage. This was someone who had spent months, possibly years, preparing for a departure that would leave him with maximum financial advantage and minimum legal exposure. The casual tone of his text message wasn't kindness. It was confidence that I was unprepared to challenge his preferred narrative. "Rachel, what are my actual rights here?" I asked. "If Tyler has moved our assets into business entities I'm not part of, can I recover any of it?" "Texas is a community property state," she replied, continuing to type while she talked. "That means assets acquired during marriage are generally considered jointly owned, regardless of whose name is on the accounts. But proving that assets were transferred inappropriately requires documentation and legal expertise. Tyler's business entity strategy was probably designed to complicate that process." She paused her typing and looked at me directly. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. Over the past year, has Tyler asked you to sign any documents? Business forms, tax papers, investment authorizations, anything that might have seemed routine, but could have granted him additional authority over your assets? The question triggered a memory that made my stomach drop. 6 months ago, Tyler had asked me to sign what he described as updated account authorization forms for our investment portfolio. He explained that our financial advisor was implementing new security protocols that required both spouses to explicitly confirm their account access preferences. I had signed the documents without careful review, trusting Tyler's explanation, and focused on a client crisis that was consuming my attention at the time. "Oh God," I said, realizing the implications. He had me sign investment account modifications 6 months ago. I didn't read them carefully because he said they were just security updates. Rachel's expression confirmed my worst fears. Those documents probably transferred your ownership interest in the investment accounts to Tyler individually or to his business entities. If you signed authorization transfers, he could have legally repositioned substantial assets without your knowledge. The sophistication of Tyler's strategy was breathtaking in its calculated betrayal. While maintaining the appearance of a caring husband who handled financial complexity to protect me from stress, he had been systematically removing my legal claims to assets I had helped build. Every conversation about trust and partnership had been part of a comprehensive deception designed to facilitate my own financial exploitation. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, afraid to hear the answer. Rachel's fingers flew across her keyboard as she accessed additional databases and cross-referenced the information against standard wealth accumulation patterns. "Based on your combined incomes over the past 8 years, your business profits, and Tyler's real estate development returns, you should have accumulated significant assets. Conservative estimates suggest you've built wealth in the mid to high 6 figures, possibly approaching 7 figures when you include property equity and investment growth." The number was both validation and devastation. Validation because it confirmed that my business success and our shared financial discipline had created substantial wealth. Devastation because it represented resources that might now be entirely beyond my reach, controlled by someone who had spent months preparing to exclude me from assets I had helped create. "There's something else," Rachel continued, her tone indicating that the news was about to get worse. "I'm seeing indicators that Tyler has been liquidating some investments recently. The Delaware entities show capital contributions that correspond with the withdrawal timeline from your joint accounts. He's not just protecting assets from future division. He's actively converting them into forms that will be harder to trace and recover." The revelation that Tyler was actively moving money, rather than simply protecting it, indicated a level of urgency that didn't align with his casual departure note. If he was liquidating investments and transferring funds through multiple business entities, he was preparing for something more comprehensive than a temporary separation. This was the financial infrastructure for a permanent departure designed to leave me with minimal resources and maximum difficulty proving that theft had occurred. My laptop chimed with an email notification from Austin Community Bank, the third account alert I had received in 2 days. This message informed me that our joint checking account had been closed due to insufficient funds to maintain the minimum balance requirement. The closure was effective immediately, with remaining funds transferred to an account I didn't recognize. "He's accelerating the timeline," Rachel observed, reading the email over my shoulder. "Something has triggered Tyler to move faster than his original plan. The account closure suggests he's no longer concerned about maintaining the appearance of normal financial activity." The timing suddenly made sense. Tyler's departure had coincided with my securing the largest client contracts in Rodriguez Marketing Solutions history. He had been monitoring my business success and waiting for the optimal moment to execute his exit strategy. Now that my company was financially stable and positioned for substantial growth, Tyler could claim that I had independent means to support myself while he retained control of our accumulated wealth. "Rachel, I need to understand something," I said, feeling a cold clarity settling over my shock and fear. If Tyler has been this methodical about financial preparation, what else has he been planning? What other aspects of our shared life has he been systematically dismantling? "That's exactly the right question," she replied. "Financial manipulation of this sophistication rarely exists in isolation. If Tyler has been preparing to leave for months, he's probably addressed other potential complications too. Property, rights, business relationships, social connections, anything that could give you leverage in a separation." We spent the next hour systematically reviewing every aspect of my life that intersected with Tyler's, looking for patterns of control or isolation that I had previously interpreted as normal marital coordination. The results were disturbing. Tyler had gradually positioned himself as the primary contact for our shared professional relationships, our social connections, even our household service providers. He had insisted on handling communications with our attorney, accountant, and insurance agents, claiming that his business experience made him more effective at managing these relationships. More troubling was the realization that Tyler had subtly undermined my independent relationships over the years. Friends who had been close before our marriage had gradually disappeared from our social circle, not through dramatic conflicts, but through a series of scheduling difficulties and social obligations that Tyler managed. Professional connections that could have provided me with personal support or business opportunities had been redirected through Tyler's network, making me dependent on his ongoing cooperation for access to resources I had originally developed independently. "Emma," Rachel said quietly, "I think Tyler has been planning this for much longer than we initially thought. This level of isolation and control doesn't develop over months. This has been building for years." The assessment forced me to reconsider fundamental assumptions about my marriage and my own agency within it. I had attributed Tyler's involvement in managing our shared life to his natural organizational skills and his desire to protect me from complexity I didn't enjoy dealing with. I had interpreted his guidance about professional relationships and social connections as the normal coordination that successful couples engaged in to optimize their shared advancement. Now I could see that Tyler had been systematically removing my independent options while creating the appearance of partnership and support. Every conversation about simplifying our financial management or coordinating our professional networks had been part of a long-term strategy to leave me dependent on his ongoing cooperation for access to my own resources and relationships. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the comprehensive nature of Tyler's preparation and my own lack of independent infrastructure to respond effectively. "First, we document everything we've discovered today before Tyler realizes you're investigating," Rachel replied. "Then we engage professionals who specialize in untangling this kind of financial manipulation. You're going to need a forensic accountant and an attorney who understands complex asset recovery." She paused, studying my expression. "But Emma, I want you to understand something important. Tyler made a critical mistake in his strategy. He assumed that 8 years of financial dependency had left you unprepared to fight back. He underestimated your business skills and your ability to build independent resources. Rodriguez Marketing Solutions gives you leverage he didn't account for. How does my business help if he's taken everything else? Because it proves you're capable of creating value independently," Rachel explained, "and because Tyler's financial manipulation was predicated on the assumption that you would remain dependent and compliant. Your business success demonstrates that you have skills and resources he can't control or manipulate." The conversation with Rachel had transformed my understanding of both my situation and my options. Tyler's comprehensive betrayal was devastating, but it was also evidence of planning, evidence of deception, evidence of financial crimes that created legal vulnerabilities for him that he probably hadn't fully considered. Most importantly, It was evidence that I was far more capable and resourceful than Tyler had assumed when he designed his exit strategy. As Rachel prepared to leave, promising to connect me with the specialized professionals I would need, she offered one final observation that changed my perspective on everything that had happened. "Emma, I've seen this pattern before with successful women who get involved with men who feel threatened by their independence. Tyler didn't leave because he fell in love with Sarah Chen. He left because he realized he couldn't control you anymore. Your business success made you too independent, too confident, too capable of questioning his authority. The affair was just the vehicle for an exit strategy he'd been developing since he realized he couldn't diminish you into permanent compliance." After Rachel left, I sat in my kitchen as the afternoon sun moved across the granite counters, holding Tyler's yellow sticky note and thinking about the past 8 years with completely new understanding. Tyler hadn't gradually become someone who would betray me. He had always been someone capable of this level of manipulation. I had simply been too trusting, too focused on building my business, too willing to believe that someone who claimed to love me wouldn't systematically exploit that trust. But Tyler had also made a fundamental miscalculation. He had assumed that emotional betrayal and financial manipulation would leave me devastated and compliant, willing to accept whatever settlement he was prepared to offer in exchange for ending the crisis he had created. He hadn't considered that the same analytical skills and strategic thinking that had built Rodriguez Marketing Solutions might be equally effective when applied to recovering from his betrayal. The yellow sticky note that was supposed to inform me of my abandonment had instead become the catalyst for discovering Tyler's comprehensive deception. But it had also revealed something Tyler hadn't anticipated, that his carefully planned departure had left behind a trail of evidence that could fundamentally alter the power dynamics of our separation. Tyler Mitchell was about to learn that Emma Rodriguez was far more formidable than the compliant wife he thought he was leaving behind. Tyler called at 7:30 Monday morning, just as I was preparing to leave for my first meeting with Marcus Williams, the attorney Rachel had recommended. The timing wasn't coincidental. Tyler knew my schedule well enough to understand that early morning calls would catch me during my most stressful transition time, when I was mentally preparing for important meetings while managing the practical details of getting out the door. It was a classic manipulation tactic designed to create emotional pressure when I was least equipped to think clearly. "Emma, sweetheart, I know this is difficult," Tyler began, his voice carrying the careful concern he used when trying to manage challenging situations. "I was hoping we could talk before you do anything dramatic. I understand you're hurt, but let's handle this maturely." The casual assumption that I might do something dramatic revealed how thoroughly Tyler had misjudged my response to his departure. He was operating from a framework where emotional women make impulsive decisions that complicate rational solutions, while reasonable men provide stable guidance through temporary difficulties. It was the same patronizing dynamic that had characterized our marriage whenever I questioned his financial decisions or expressed concerns about our relationship patterns. "I'm not planning anything dramatic, Tyler," I replied, keeping my voice steady while gathering the financial documents I planned to review with Marcus. "But I am planning to understand exactly what's been happening with our assets." Rachel helped me realize there are some significant gaps in my knowledge about our financial situation. The brief silence on Tyler's end told me everything I needed to know about his confidence level. He had expected emotional devastation and desperate attempts to negotiate his return. Instead, he was hearing professional composure and systematic investigation. The shift in power dynamics was already beginning, and Tyler was smart enough to recognize that his carefully planned departure was encountering unexpected resistance. "Emma, Rachel Thompson is a divorce attorney masquerading as a financial advisor," Tyler said, his tone shifting from concerned husband to business adversary. "She makes money by creating conflict between spouses who could otherwise work things out amicably. I hope you'll consider my perspective before letting her influence your decisions." The characterization of Rachel was both factually inaccurate and strategically revealing. Rachel was indeed a financial advisor, not a divorce attorney, but Tyler's immediate assumption that I was pursuing legal action suggested he was far more concerned about potential challenges to his asset positioning than his casual departure note had indicated. His attempt to undermine my trust in Rachel also confirmed that my investigation was already threatening his preferred narrative. Actually, Tyler, Rachel is exactly what you always claimed she was, an excellent financial advisor who helps people understand complex situations, I replied. The only difference is that now I'm the one benefiting from her expertise, instead of just hearing about it secondhand through your summaries. This adversarial approach isn't necessary, Tyler continued, the false patience in his voice becoming more strained. I understand you're angry about Sarah, but that's separate from our practical arrangements. We can work out a fair division of everything without involving lawyers and creating unnecessary complications. The attempt to separate emotional betrayal from financial arrangements was classic Tyler, the same compartmentalization strategy he used in business negotiations. By framing our asset division as a practical matter distinct from his relationship choices, Tyler was positioning himself as the reasonable party focused on solutions while implying that any challenges to his proposed arrangements were emotional reactions rather than legitimate financial concerns. I'm not angry, Tyler, I said, surprised by my own calm. I'm informed. And what I've learned is that our financial arrangements are significantly more complicated than I realized. Did you forget to mention the business entities you created over the past 18 months? Or the investment account modifications I signed 6 months ago? This time, the silence stretched long enough for me to know that Tyler was recalculating his entire approach. His departure strategy had been predicated on my continued ignorance about his financial preparations. The fact that I was already aware of his business entities and the significance of documents I had signed meant that his timeline was compromised and his leverage significantly reduced. Emma, those are legitimate business structures designed to optimize our tax situation and protect our assets from potential liabilities, Tyler finally responded, falling back on the same explanations he had used to justify previous financial decisions I had questioned. The fact that Rachel is encouraging you to view standard business practices as suspicious tells you everything you need to know about her motivations. Standard business practices that exclude one spouse from asset ownership while using her income and credit to acquire property? I asked. Standard business practices that transfer community property into individual business entities without disclosure? I'm beginning to understand why you always discouraged me from getting too involved in financial management, Tyler. It wasn't because you wanted to protect me from complexity. It was because you wanted to protect your strategy from scrutiny. The conversation was revealing Tyler's fundamental miscalculation about my capabilities and resources. He had spent years conditioning me to defer to his financial expertise while building my own professional skills and confidence through Rodriguez Marketing Solutions. Now, those same analytical abilities that made me successful in business were being applied to understanding his deception. And Tyler was discovering that the compliant wife he had cultivated was far more formidable than he had anticipated. I think we should table this conversation until we're both thinking more clearly, Tyler said, employing the dismissal strategy he used when discussions weren't proceeding according to his preferences. I'll call you later this week when you've had time to process everything more objectively. Actually, Tyler, I think my processing is quite objective, I replied. But you're right that we should continue this conversation later, preferably through attorneys who can ensure that all the relevant information is properly disclosed. After ending the call, I realized that Tyler's primary concern wasn't my emotional state or our relationship reconciliation. His priority was managing the timeline and scope of my investigation to minimize damage to his financial position. The caring husband persona was a negotiation tactic designed to maintain my cooperation while he consolidated his asset protection strategy. The meeting with Marcus Williams confirmed my worst fears while also providing unexpected hope. Marcus specialized in complex asset recovery cases, particularly those involving sophisticated financial manipulation between spouses. His office occupied the top floor of a downtown Austin high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake and walls lined with legal volumes that suggested both expertise and substantial success. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I've reviewed the preliminary information Rachel provided," Marcus began, spreading documents across his conference table. "Your husband has implemented a textbook asset isolation strategy, but he's also created several legal vulnerabilities that we can exploit. The good news is that his sophistication actually works against him in some ways." Marcus explained that Tyler's business entity creation timeline, combined with the investment account modifications and property title structures, established a clear pattern of deliberate community property manipulation. Under Texas law, assets acquired during marriage were presumptively community property regardless of individual ownership structures, and Tyler's systematic efforts to circumvent those protections could be considered fraudulent transfer of marital assets. "The Delaware entities are particularly problematic for your husband," Marcus continued. "Cross-jurisdictional asset hiding creates federal complications that significantly increase his legal exposure. If we can demonstrate that he used these entities to conceal community property from you, he's facing potential criminal charges, in addition to civil asset recovery claims." The legal framework was more favorable than I had hoped, but Marcus also outlined the challenges we would face. Tyler's financial manipulation had been methodical and well documented, but proving fraudulent intent required comprehensive investigation that would be expensive and time-consuming. Tyler's business success meant he could afford excellent legal representation and extended litigation designed to exhaust my resources before achieving resolution. "However," Marcus added, "your husband has made several strategic errors that give us significant leverage. First, his departure timing and method suggest consciousness of guilt. Second, his asset transfers accelerated after your business success, indicating opportunistic rather than legitimate business planning. Third, his casual communication about the separation suggests he doesn't anticipate serious legal challenges, which means he may not have adequately prepared for aggressive asset recovery efforts." Marcus recommended an immediate comprehensive asset freeze to prevent further transfers while we developed our case. This would require filing emergency motions that would essentially declare financial war on Tyler, but it was the only way to preserve assets that might otherwise disappear into increasingly complex corporate structures or offshore accounts. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to understand that this approach will escalate the conflict significantly," Marcus warned. "Your husband will respond with substantial resources and sophisticated legal strategies. Are you prepared for an extended battle? That will likely become very personal and potentially very public." The question forced me to confront the reality of challenging someone who had spent months preparing for exactly this scenario. Tyler had financial resources, legal preparation, and social connections that I was only beginning to understand. Fighting him would require everything I had learned about strategic thinking and resource management, applied under circumstances where the stakes were my entire financial future. "Marcus, Tyler spent years positioning me to be dependent and compliant," I replied. "He assumed that financial manipulation and emotional betrayal would leave me too devastated to fight back effectively. But he fundamentally misunderstood who I am and what I'm capable of. I built Rodriguez Marketing Solutions from nothing into a successful business. I can certainly learn to rebuild my financial security from whatever Tyler left behind." "That's exactly the attitude that wins these cases," Marcus said, his professional demeanor warming slightly. "But I want you to be prepared for Tyler's response. Men who implement this level of financial control don't surrender easily when challenged. He'll escalate pressure in ways designed to force your capitulation." Marcus's prediction proved accurate within hours of filing our emergency motions. Tyler's response came through his attorney, Jennifer Walsh, one of Austin's most expensive and aggressive family law practitioners. The formal letter demanded immediate cessation of what they characterized as harassment and threatened sanctions for frivolous litigation designed to extract financial concessions through legal intimidation. More concerning was Tyler's personal response. He called my office directly, bypassing my personal phone to create professional disruption during my busiest client management period. When my assistant transferred the call, Tyler's voice carried none of the concerned reasonableness from our morning conversation. "Emma, I'm disappointed that you've chosen to make this adversarial," Tyler said, his tone cold and formal. "I had hoped we could handle our separation with dignity, but your legal threats force me to protect myself and my business interests. I think you should understand the potential consequences before you continue down this path." The shift from manipulative concern to open intimidation confirmed that Tyler viewed my legal action as a serious threat to his plans. His mention of protecting his business interests also revealed information I hadn't previously considered. If Tyler's business success was partially built on assets he had extracted from our marriage, challenging the transfers might threaten not just our personal financial arrangements, but his entire professional foundation. "Tyler, I'm not making threats," I replied. "I'm seeking accurate information about assets that were acquired during our marriage. If that's adversarial, it's only because you've structured our finances to make transparency adversarial." "You're forcing me to take steps I had hoped to avoid," Tyler continued. "Your business depends on reputation and client confidence. Extended litigation creates uncertainty that affects professional relationships. I hope you'll consider whether pursuing this course is worth potentially damaging everything you've built with Rodriguez Marketing Solutions." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Tyler was suggesting that he could damage my business reputation through the legal process or through his professional network connections. It was the same control mechanism he had used throughout our marriage. The implication that challenging his authority would result in consequences that extended beyond our immediate disagreement. "Tyler, are you threatening my business?" I asked, directly, wanting his response on the record since Marcus had advised me to document all communications. "I'm pointing out practical realities," Tyler replied. "Legal battles create publicity and uncertainty. Your clients may have concerns about working with someone involved in contentious personal litigation. I'm simply suggesting that you consider all the implications before continuing this approach." After ending the call, I immediately contacted Marcus to report Tyler's threats. His response was both reassuring and concerning. "This is actually good evidence for our case," Marcus explained. "Tyler's threats to damage your business reputation demonstrate the control mechanisms he's been using throughout your marriage. But he's also not wrong about the potential professional complications. We need to be strategic about managing the public aspects of this case." The reality of my situation was becoming clearer. Tyler had spent years building a comprehensive control structure that extended beyond financial assets to include professional relationships and social connections. Challenging him meant confronting not just his individual actions, but an entire ecosystem of influence and dependency he had cultivated around our shared life. That evening, as I reviewed client files and prepared for the week ahead, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief but chilling. "Emma, this is Sarah Chen. Tyler told me about your legal actions. I think we should talk. There are things about your situation you don't understand. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow?" The message from Sarah represented an escalation I hadn't anticipated. Tyler was deploying additional resources to manage my resistance, and Sarah's offer to provide information suggested either an attempt to manipulate me through false sympathy or the possibility that Tyler's plans were more complex than I had realized. Either way, Sarah's direct contact meant that Tyler's departure strategy was encountering significant complications that required active management. I forwarded Sarah's message to Marcus, who responded within minutes with advice that confirmed the seriousness of the situation. "Do not respond to Sarah Chen. Do not meet with her under any circumstances. Her contact suggests coordinated pressure tactics that could be used against you later. Tyler is escalating because our asset freeze motions are threatening his timeline. The text from Sarah crystallized something important about my position. Tyler had assumed that emotional manipulation and financial pressure would force my compliance with his preferred separation terms. Instead, my legal resistance was threatening his carefully planned departure and forcing him to deploy additional resources to manage complications he hadn't anticipated. For the first time since finding Tyler's yellow sticky note, I felt something approaching confidence about my ability to navigate this crisis. Tyler's escalating pressure tactics were evidence that my investigation and legal action were effective. His threats and intimidation attempts revealed vulnerabilities in his strategy that I could exploit. Tyler Mitchell had designed his departure to leave me devastated and dependent, willing to accept whatever arrangement he offered in exchange for ending the crisis he had created. Instead, he was discovering that Emma Rodriguez was far more resourceful and determined than the compliant wife he thought he was abandoning. The real battle was just beginning, but Tyler had already made a critical error. He had underestimated his opponent, and now he was fighting from a position where his own sophisticated manipulation had created legal evidence that could be used against him. The yellow sticky note that was supposed to announce his victory had instead initiated a war he was not prepared to fight. The forensic accountant Marcus recommended arrived Tuesday morning with 3 laptops, 2 boxes of financial analysis, software, and the methodical intensity of someone who specialized in untangling deliberately complex financial deceptions. Dr. Patricia Hernandez had built her reputation over 15 years of exposing sophisticated asset hiding schemes, from corporate fraud cases to high-net-worth divorce proceedings. Her preliminary review of Tyler's business entities and transfer patterns took less than 4 hours to reveal what she described as one of the most systematic spousal asset theft operations she had encountered. "Your husband is exceptionally thorough," Patricia observed, spreading printouts across my dining room table that showed the intricate web of Tyler's financial manipulation. But his thoroughness created a comprehensive audit trail that actually makes our job easier. Every transfer, every business entity formation, every account modification is documented with timestamps that correspond to specific events in your marriage and business development. Patricia's analysis revealed patterns I had been too close to recognize. Tyler's most aggressive asset transfers had coincided with my major business milestones, suggesting he had been monitoring my professional success and timing his extractions to maximize his advantage. The business entity formations had accelerated dramatically after I signed the consulting contracts that tripled Rodriguez Marketing Solutions' revenue, indicating that Tyler viewed my financial independence as a threat that required immediate countermeasures. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your husband made a critical error in his strategy," Patricia continued. "He assumed that complexity would protect him from scrutiny, but sophisticated financial manipulation requires sophisticated documentation. Every clever structure he created to hide assets from you also created evidence trails that demonstrate intent to defraud." The forensic analysis went beyond simply tracking where money had gone. Patricia's investigation revealed that Tyler had been systematically undervaluing community property assets while inflating his business expenses and investment losses. The quarterly financial reports he had provided me were essentially fiction, designed to make our shared wealth appear smaller while obscuring the true scope of assets he was transferring to individual control. Most damaging was Patricia's discovery that Tyler had been using Rodriguez Marketing Solutions' success as leverage for his own business financing without my knowledge. He had listed my company's assets and projected revenue as collateral for loans that funded his Delaware business entities, essentially using my work to finance the very structures he was using to steal from me. "This crosses the line from civil asset concealment into criminal fraud," Patricia explained. "Your husband used your business as undisclosed collateral while simultaneously stealing marital assets to fund competing business interests. That's not just divorce court territory anymore. That's potential felony territory." The criminal implications. transformed our legal strategy completely. Marcus had been preparing for aggressive civil litigation to recover hidden assets. Now we had evidence that could support criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Tyler's sophisticated business entity strategy hadn't just failed to protect him, it had created federal violations that carried serious criminal penalties. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we need to discuss how you want to proceed," Marcus said during our emergency strategy session that afternoon. "We can pursue this through family court as complex asset recovery, or we can involve federal prosecutors and pursue criminal charges. The criminal route provides more leverage, but also escalates the conflict significantly." The decision required understanding Tyler's vulnerabilities and my own strategic objectives. Criminal prosecution would certainly pressure Tyler into favorable asset recovery terms, but it would also create publicity that could affect both our professional reputations. Tyler's business depended on investor confidence and client trust that could be damaged by criminal fraud allegations, even if he was ultimately not convicted. "Marcus, what's Tyler's biggest vulnerability right now?" I asked, trying to think strategically rather than emotionally about my options. "Time and transparency," Marcus replied immediately. "Tyler's asset protection strategy requires ongoing management and continued secrecy. He's counting on you accepting a quick settlement to avoid extended litigation. Criminal exposure forces him into defensive positions that prevent him from continuing his asset manipulation while creating urgent pressure to resolve the situation." Patricia nodded in agreement. "Plus, his business entity structures are designed to optimize tax advantages that become liabilities if his transfers are reclassified as fraudulent. Tyler could face substantial tax penalties and business license complications if this escalates to criminal prosecution." The strategic framework was becoming clear. Tyler had built his departure plan around the assumption that I would prioritize emotional closure over financial recovery, accepting whatever settlement terms he offered to avoid prolonged conflict. Criminal prosecution would force Tyler to abandon that timeline and negotiate from a position where continued secrecy was impossible, and his professional reputation was at stake. "Let's pursue both tracks simultaneously," I decided. Civil asset recovery through family court and criminal referral through federal prosecutors. Tyler wanted to control the timeline and terms of our separation. Let's show him what happens when the person he's trying to manipulate controls the escalation instead. The federal prosecutor's office responded to our criminal referral faster than anyone had anticipated. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen, no relation to Sarah despite the shared surname, specialized in white-collar financial crimes and had particular expertise in cases involving sophisticated asset-hiding schemes. His initial review of Patricia's forensic analysis resulted in a meeting scheduled for Thursday morning to discuss potential federal prosecution. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this case presents several interesting prosecutorial opportunities," Michael Chen explained during our conference at the Federal Building downtown. "Cross-state business entity fraud, potential money laundering through complex financial structures, and fraudulent use of another person's business assets as undisclosed collateral. Your husband's sophistication actually works against him because federal prosecutors prioritize cases that demonstrate systematic criminal planning." The prosecutor's enthusiasm for Tyler's case was both reassuring and sobering. Reassuring because it confirmed that Tyler's actions constituted serious crimes with substantial legal consequences. Sobering because it meant that my marriage had devolved into a federal criminal investigation that would fundamentally alter both our lives, regardless of the ultimate outcome. "What's the timeline for federal prosecution?" Marcus asked, clearly thinking about coordination with our civil litigation strategy. "We'll need approximately 6 weeks to complete our investigation and present to the grand jury," Michael replied. "But we can expedite the process if Mr. Mitchell attempts to continue his asset manipulation or leave the jurisdiction. Federal prosecution creates immediate leverage for civil asset recovery because defendants typically prefer negotiated settlements to extended criminal exposure." The federal prosecutor's timeline aligned perfectly with our civil litigation schedule. Tyler would face simultaneous pressure from criminal investigation and civil asset recovery demands, forcing him to choose between expensive legal defense on multiple fronts or negotiated resolution that included comprehensive asset disclosure and favorable recovery terms. Tyler's response to the federal criminal referral came within 24 hours, but not through his attorney. Instead, he appeared at my office Thursday afternoon, bypassing normal communication protocols to create face-to-face pressure when I was least prepared for personal confrontation. My assistant buzzed to inform me that Tyler was in the reception area, insisting that he needed to discuss urgent personal matters that couldn't wait for scheduled attorney communications. "Emma, we need to talk immediately," Tyler said when I reluctantly agreed to see him in my conference room. His usual, composed demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled anger, mixed with something that looked like genuine fear. "This federal prosecution threat is insane. You're destroying both our lives over money that we can split reasonably without involving criminal investigators." The desperation beneath Tyler's anger confirmed that our escalation strategy was more effective than I had hoped. Tyler had built his entire departure plan around controlling the timeline and scope of our separation. Federal criminal investigation removed his control completely while creating professional and legal consequences he hadn't prepared for. "Tyler, I'm not threatening federal prosecution," I replied, maintaining professional distance despite his obvious emotional distress. "I'm providing evidence of financial crimes to appropriate authorities. If that creates prosecution risk for you, it's because your actions meet the definition of federal financial crimes." "You know this isn't what I intended," Tyler continued, his voice rising in a way that reminded me why he had always insisted on handling difficult conversations through written communications or controlled environments. "I was trying to protect our assets and plan for our future. The business entity strategy was legitimate tax optimization that would have benefited both of us." The attempt to reframe his systematic asset theft as protective financial planning revealed how thoroughly Tyler had convinced himself that his manipulation was justified. In his mind, he wasn't stealing from me. He was managing our shared resources more effectively than I was capable of doing independently. The fact that these management decisions excluded me entirely and positioned assets for his individual benefit was simply practical optimization rather than deliberate fraud. "Tyler, protecting assets typically involves disclosure to both spouses," I said. "Tax optimization typically benefits both parties rather than transferring community property to individual control. If your intentions were legitimate, why did you need to keep your strategy secret from me?" "Because you don't understand complex financial structures," Tyler replied, falling back on the same condescending explanations he had used throughout our marriage to justify excluding me from financial decisions. "I was handling sophisticated business arrangements that required expertise you don't have. Involving you in every detail would have complicated the process unnecessarily." The conversation revealed Tyler's fundamental inability to recognize that his paternalistic control had always been manipulation rather than protection. Even facing federal criminal prosecution, he couldn't acknowledge that systematically excluding me from asset management decisions while using my resources to fund his individual business interests constituted theft rather than optimization. "Tyler, I think you should discuss this situation with your attorney rather than with me directly," I said, ending the conversation before it could escalate further. "All communication about our separation should go through proper legal channels from now on." "Emma, please don't destroy everything we've built together over hurt feelings about Sarah," Tyler said, making one final attempt to reframe the situation as emotional overreaction rather than legitimate response to financial crimes. "I made mistakes in our relationship, but federal prosecution is a nuclear option that will damage both of us permanently." After Tyler left, I realized that his direct appeal had actually strengthened our legal position. His admission that he had made mistakes in our relationship combined with his obvious desperation to avoid federal prosecution, provided additional evidence that he recognized the illegitimate nature of his financial manipulation. More importantly, his continued attempts to characterize my response as emotional overreaction demonstrated that he still fundamentally misunderstood both my capabilities and my determination. The federal prosecutor's office accelerated their timeline after learning about Tyler's direct contact with me. Michael Chen called Friday morning to inform me that Tyler's attempt to circumvent legal communication protocols while under federal investigation had been interpreted as potential witness intimidation, adding another layer of criminal exposure to his already substantial legal problems. Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Mitchell's behavior suggests someone who understands the seriousness of his legal position, but continues to make poor strategic decisions, Michael observed. That typically indicates that we'll receive cooperation offers sooner rather than later. Defendants who attempt direct pressure on witnesses are usually defendants who are preparing to negotiate rather than fight. The prediction proved accurate Monday morning when Jennifer Walsh, Tyler's attorney, contacted Marcus to request an emergency settlement conference. Tyler's legal team was proposing comprehensive asset disclosure and negotiated recovery terms in exchange for agreement not to pursue federal criminal prosecution. The speed of their capitulation confirmed that Patricia's forensic analysis had revealed more damaging evidence than Tyler's sophisticated planning had anticipated. Emma, they're offering complete financial transparency and asset restitution, Marcus explained during our strategy call. Essentially, Tyler is prepared to reverse his entire asset protection strategy in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution. The question is whether you want to accept settlement or continue with federal prosecution to establish legal precedent. The settlement terms exceeded our most optimistic projections. Tyler was offering to reverse all business entity transfers, restore my ownership interest in all community property assets, and provide comprehensive documentation of every financial transaction during our marriage. Additionally, he was proposing substantial financial compensation for what his attorney euphemistically described as disruption and inconvenience caused by his financial management strategy. Most importantly, Tyler was agreeing to transfer sole ownership of our Westlake Hills house to me as part of the settlement, despite his previous insistence that the property was his individual asset. The proposed terms would leave me in a stronger financial position than I had ever imagined, while Tyler would retain enough assets to continue his business operations and relationship with Sarah Chen. Marcus, what's your assessment of Tyler's offer? I asked, trying to evaluate the proposal objectively rather than emotionally. It's comprehensive capitulation, Marcus replied. Tyler is offering everything we could reasonably expect to achieve through extended litigation, plus additional compensation that acknowledges the wrongful nature of his actions. The only downside is that settlement prevents criminal prosecution that might deter similar behavior by other defendants. The decision required balancing personal justice against practical recovery. Criminal prosecution would establish legal precedent and provide emotional satisfaction, but settlement would achieve complete financial restoration while allowing me to move forward without extended litigation stress. Tyler's offer essentially acknowledged that his financial manipulation had been illegitimate while providing full compensation for the damages he had caused. Let's accept the settlement with one modification, I decided. I want Tyler to provide a written acknowledgement that his financial management during our marriage constituted deliberate concealment of community property assets. If he's willing to reverse his actions, he should also be willing to acknowledge what those actions actually were. Tyler's written acknowledgement arrived within hours, confirming that he had systematically concealed community property assets through business entity transfers and investment account modifications without my knowledge or consent. The document essentially served as a confession that his financial strategy had been designed to exclude me from assets I was legally entitled to share. The settlement documentation was completed Friday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after Tyler had left his yellow sticky note announcing his departure. The final terms provided me with assets worth significantly more than our original shared wealth, comprehensive documentation of Tyler's financial manipulation, and legal acknowledgement that his actions had been deliberate concealment rather than legitimate financial management. Most satisfying was the realization that Tyler's sophisticated departure strategy had backfired completely. His attempt to steal marital assets through complex business entity structures had created evidence trails that enabled complete recovery plus substantial additional compensation. His assumption that I would be too devastated and dependent to fight back effectively had proven disastrously wrong. Tyler Mitchell had designed his exit to leave me financially dependent and emotionally devastated, willing to accept whatever terms he offered to end the crisis he had created. Instead, he had discovered that Emma Rodriguez was far more formidable than the compliant wife he thought he was abandoning. His yellow sticky note had initiated a battle he was comprehensively unprepared to fight, resulting in his complete defeat, and my emergence as an independent woman with both the resources and the knowledge to never be manipulated again. 3 months after signing the settlement agreement, I stood in the renovated kitchen of what was now indisputably my house, watching the sun rise over Barton Creek while drinking coffee from a mug that bore the logo of Rodriguez Marketing Solutions. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler's departure had resulted in me gaining complete ownership of the home he had so carefully structured to exclude me from, along with financial resources that exceeded anything we had accumulated together. During 8 years of marriage, the house felt fundamentally different now, not just because Tyler was gone, but because every decision about its design and function was mine alone. The minimalist aesthetic that Sarah Chen had imposed during their collaboration had been replaced, with elements that reflected my actual preferences rather than accommodating Tyler's vision of appropriate style. My grandmother's leather armchair had been moved back to the living room where it belonged. The contemporary art pieces I loved had reclaimed their prominent positions on walls that no longer needed to serve anyone's aesthetic sensibilities, but my own. Most significantly, the home office that had once been Tyler's domain of financial secrecy had been transformed into a transparent workspace where every document, every account, and every financial decision was completely visible and under my direct control. The filing cabinets that had once contained only Tyler's business papers now held comprehensive records of my independent financial management, investment strategies, and business expansion plans that no one else influenced or approved. Rodriguez Marketing Solutions had flourished beyond my most optimistic projections during the months following Tyler's departure. The major consulting contracts that had initially triggered Tyler's accelerated asset extraction had led to additional opportunities with Austin's rapidly expanding technology sector. My client base had tripled, requiring me to hire 2 additional consultants and move into larger office space in the downtown business district. The professional reputation that Tyler had threatened to damage through extended litigation had instead been enhanced by my demonstration of grace under pressure and strategic thinking during crisis management. The business success wasn't entirely surprising, but its scope had exceeded what I had imagined possible while managing the constraints of my marriage to Tyler. I now realized that Tyler's involvement in my professional decisions had been subtly limiting my growth, not through obvious obstruction, but through the same kind of helpful guidance that had characterized his financial management. His suggestions about appropriate client relationships, optimal business strategies, and professional networking had been designed to keep Rodriguez Marketing Solutions successful enough to provide income for our household while preventing it from becoming large enough to threaten his authority or provide me with complete financial independence. Without Tyler's input, I had pursued opportunities he had discouraged as too risky or inappropriate for my expertise level. The results had been transformative, establishing Rodriguez Marketing Solutions as one of Austin's premier boutique consulting firms with a reputation for innovative strategy development and crisis management excellence. The business that Tyler had viewed as a supplementary income source had become the foundation for genuine financial security and professional fulfillment. The settlement terms had provided me with more than asset recovery. They had delivered comprehensive education about financial management and investment strategy that Tyler had deliberately kept from me during our marriage. Working with Patricia Hernandez and a new financial advisor who specialized in supporting newly independent high-net-worth women, I had developed investment approaches and asset protection strategies that were both more conservative and more profitable than Tyler's business entity manipulations had ever been. My new financial advisor, Dr. Linda Harrison, had been recommended by Rachel Thompson specifically because of her expertise in helping women recover from financial manipulation in marriage. Linda's approach to wealth management emphasized transparency, education, and client empowerment rather than the paternalistic guidance that had characterized Tyler's financial oversight. Every investment decision, every account structure, and every strategic choice was explained comprehensively and required my active approval rather than passive acceptance. "Emma, you've achieved something remarkable," Linda observed during our quarterly portfolio review 6 months after the settlement. Most women recovering from financial manipulation in marriage struggle with confidence about independent financial decision-making. You've not only mastered complex investment strategies, but developed wealth management approaches that outperform traditional models. The compliment was particularly meaningful because it reflected genuine capability rather than encouragement designed to build confidence. Linda's assessment was based on measurable results that demonstrated my ability to create and manage wealth independently, without relying on anyone else's expertise or guidance. The financial skills that Tyler had insisted I didn't possess had proven to be entirely learnable when I was allowed to engage with them directly, rather than through his filtered summaries and controlled access. More importantly, my approach to financial management had become a foundation for broader independence that extended into every aspect of my life. The analytical thinking and strategic planning that had always characterized my business success now informed my personal decisions as well, from household management to social relationships to long-term life planning. The woman who had accepted Tyler's guidance about appropriate friendships and professional connections had been replaced by someone who made those choices based on her own values and objectives. The social implications of my separation from Tyler had been less complicated than I had anticipated, partly because his threats about reputation damage had proven largely ineffective. Austin's business community had responded to the situation with professionalism and support rather than the social ostracism Tyler had predicted. Several potential clients had specifically mentioned their respect for my handling of a difficult personal situation as a factor in their decision to engage Rodriguez Marketing Solutions for their projects. Tyler's predictions about social consequences had reflected his own social networking approach, which emphasized hierarchy, influence, and reciprocal obligation rather than genuine professional relationships. My business connections were based on demonstrated competence and mutual value creation, which meant they remained stable even when my personal circumstances changed dramatically. The difference revealed how thoroughly Tyler had misunderstood both my professional foundation and the nature of authentic business relationships. Sarah Chen had proven to be a more complex figure than I had initially understood. 3 weeks after the settlement was finalized, Sarah had contacted me directly to request a private conversation that wasn't about Tyler or our separation, but about potential business collaboration. Her interior design firm was expanding into comprehensive lifestyle consulting for high-net-worth clients, and she was seeking marketing expertise to develop brand positioning and client acquisition strategies. The conversation had been professionally productive and personally illuminating. Sarah was indeed exceptionally talented at her work, but she was also someone who had been manipulated by Tyler's presentation of our marriage as a business partnership rather than a romantic relationship. Tyler had convinced Sarah that I was a willing participant in asset optimization strategies rather than an excluded victim of financial manipulation. Her involvement in Tyler's departure had been based on incomplete information rather than deliberate participation in his deception. "Emma, I need you to understand that Tyler described your marriage as a business arrangement that had run its course. Sarah explained during our coffee meeting at a downtown Austin cafe. He said you were both ready to dissolve the partnership, amicably, but that you needed time to adjust to the transition. I had no idea about the asset concealment or the fact that you weren't aware of his departure plans. Sarah's explanation didn't excuse her involvement in Tyler's departure, but it provided insight into his manipulation strategies that extended beyond financial control. Tyler had managed multiple relationships simultaneously through careful information, management, and strategic deception, maintaining different narratives with different people to serve his overall objectives. His ability to compartmentalize and control information had been far more sophisticated than I had realized, even after discovering his financial manipulation. The conversation with Sarah had also revealed that Tyler's relationship with her was already experiencing significant stress. His financial settlement with me had reduced his available assets substantially, limiting his ability to fund the lifestyle and business expansion he had promised Sarah their relationship would enable. Additionally, Sarah was discovering that Tyler's approach to partnership involved the same kind of helpful guidance and gradual control that I had experienced, but applied to her business decisions and professional relationships. Tyler has opinions about everything I do, Sarah had confided. My client relationships, my design choices, my business expansion plans. He frames it as supportive guidance, but I'm starting to feel like I can't make independent decisions without his input and approval. The pattern was entirely predictable once Tyler's fundamental approach to relationships became clear. He didn't partner with people, he managed them. His need for control wasn't specific to marriage or financial arrangements, but represented a core personality characteristic that would manifest in any significant relationship. Sarah was experiencing the same gradual erosion of independence that had characterized my marriage to Tyler, just applied to different domains and implemented more quickly because Tyler was no longer concerned about maintaining long-term deception. 6 months after Tyler's departure, Sarah had ended their relationship and moved back to California to restart her design business independently. Her departure had reportedly devastated Tyler, not because of romantic attachment, but because it represented another failure of his control strategies. The man who had spent years systematically managing my dependence and compliance had discovered that his manipulation techniques were less effective when applied to someone who wasn't emotionally invested in the relationship's success. Tyler's current situation, according to information that reached me through Austin's interconnected business community, was significantly more challenging than his confident departure had anticipated. The settlement terms had required him to dissolve his complex business entity structures and consolidate his assets in ways that reduced his tax advantages and strategic flexibility. His real estate development projects were struggling without the financial resources he had extracted from our marriage, and his professional reputation had been damaged by industry awareness of the financial manipulation that had necessitated federal investigation. More problematically for Tyler, his pattern of relationship manipulation had become visible to potential romantic and business partners who were now aware of his history. The man who had built his success through careful control of information and strategic relationship management was discovering that transparency was far more difficult to manage than secrecy had been. His departure strategy had been designed to provide him with maximum advantage and minimum accountability, but the legal consequences had created comprehensive accountability and substantial disadvantage. The transformation in my own life had exceeded what I had thought possible during the devastating weeks immediately following Tyler's departure. The woman who had found a yellow sticky note announcing her abandonment had been replaced by someone who approached every decision from a position of strength, knowledge, and complete independence. The financial security that Tyler had threatened was now more robust than it had ever been during our marriage. The professional success that Tyler had suggested might be damaged by extended litigation had instead been enhanced by demonstration of strategic thinking and crisis management excellence. Most importantly, the personal confidence that Tyler had gradually eroded through years of helpful guidance and protective management had been replaced by proven capability and genuine self-reliance. I had learned to trust my own judgment about financial decisions, professional relationships, and personal choices without requiring anyone else's approval or validation. The boundaries that defined my life were now ones I had consciously established and actively maintained rather than invisible constraints imposed by someone else's needs and preferences. The house in Westlake Hills had become a symbol of this transformation, rather than just a residence. Every room reflected choices I had made independently. Every financial decision related to its maintenance and improvement was mine alone, and every memory being created within its walls belonged to my new life, rather than my previous marriage. The property that Tyler had structured to exclude me from ownership had become the foundation for independence he had never intended me to achieve. Rodriguez Marketing Solutions had expanded into a comprehensive business consulting firm with 12 employees and clients across 3 states. The success had required learning skills and making decisions that Tyler had insisted were beyond my capabilities, but which had proven to be entirely manageable when I was allowed to engage with them directly. The business that had once been supplementary income for our household had become the cornerstone of genuine financial independence and professional fulfillment. As I reflected on the journey from Tyler's casual departure note to my current position of strength and independence, the most striking realization was how thoroughly Tyler had misjudged both my capabilities and my determination. His manipulation strategies had been designed for someone who would remain dependent and compliant, even when faced with obvious betrayal. Instead, he had encountered someone who responded to crisis by developing new capabilities and strategic approaches that exceeded what either of us had imagined possible. The yellow sticky note that Tyler had intended as notification of my abandonment had instead become the catalyst for discovering strengths I hadn't known I possessed, and building a life that was more authentic and fulfilling than anything I had experienced during our marriage. Tyler's departure had forced me to confront the reality that the security I thought I had been building was actually elaborate dependency designed to limit my options and autonomy. The irony was complete. Tyler Mitchell had planned his departure to leave me financially devastated and emotionally dependent, willing to accept whatever arrangement he offered to resolve the crisis he had created. Instead, his betrayal had revealed resources and capabilities that enabled me to build genuine security and independence beyond anything our marriage had provided. His sophisticated manipulation had created the very evidence and motivation that led to his comprehensive defeat and my emergence as a woman who could never again be controlled or manipulated by anyone. Standing in my kitchen on a beautiful Austin morning, financially secure, professionally successful, and completely in control of every aspect of my life, I could honestly say that Tyler's yellow sticky note had been the best thing that ever happened to me. His betrayal had freed me from limitations I hadn't even realized existed, creating opportunities for growth and achievement that his presence had systematically prevented. Emma Rodriguez had not only survived Tyler Mitchell's betrayal, but had used it as the foundation for building something far better than anything they had shared together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.